So next to me we have Dina Hillier, who is a vice president of comedy development at Paramount TV. Let's applaud for each one. I like it when we do it that way. Next to her is Chad Hodge, who is the writer, creator, producer of Wayward Pines and the Playboy Club. Next to her is Julie Plec, who is responsible for everything on the CW. And at the end, we have Ben Wexler, who is the writer, creator, producer of The Comedians on FX.
And Animal Practice. I created that too.
Seriously?
I said I created Animal Practice. I want to apologize. It had nothing to do with Animal Practice.
No, I was totally reading that. And then I was like, how late did he show up? Did we get past all that? Maybe that was possible.
Yeah. Fill me in. I got here late. What'd you guys?
Animal Practice was a hit. Did you know that? Yeah, it's great. So, Chad, I'm going to start with you, just because my guess is that with the Playboy Club in particular, that's a show that sort of, it represented a lot of different things to a lot of different people, which I would think would be very difficult when you got to the testing process.
Yes. I just was looking at the test results from the Playboy Club over there in the corner. I went back into my email from 4 years ago and looked at it all. Yes, and it was hard because that was the first year of Bob Greenblatt's presidency of NBC. It was the first new show. And the Playboy Club, as I sort of envisioned it, was very much like, Desperate Bunnies, like a soap opera, about these bunnies in the Playboy Club in the '60s. Very fun, very soapy, and the testing was, that stuff was positive. But there was a male character in the show named Nick Dalton, and Eddie Cibrian played him in the pilot, and there was all the testing was like, well, we want him to be more in it, and we want to know more about the mob, and we want to know more about his law firm and all this stuff that I'm like, really? And just people sort of, it's got to be a soap opera, it's got to be a mob show, it's got to be for men too, it's got to be for women, it's got to be everything to everybody. And I thought, well, this is crazy, because I kind of saw him as the Mr. Big character who kind of comes in every now and then. And the network really took those test results to heart and really, said, well, we have to beef up his character and make this make him a much bigger deal and make him the lead of the show. And suddenly we're building a set for his law firm, I mean, really. And the show then, I think, became trying to be all things to all people to sort of get the test results higher the next time, we're going to do some reshoots and we're going to do all this stuff. And then I think it made the show not as good.
And none of those things were on the docket. There was no talk about, if we ever have time, I would love to see what law cases he's working. It all came from a test audience's reaction.
Never. No, never. And then even, if you remember, a lot of the ads then sort of put him in the front of the promos and the billboards and everything. And then everyone was like, oh, they're just trying to do Mad Men. Because he kind of looked like, Don Draper and all that, and it's, so that was unfortunate.
So, but the executives that are asking you to do these things, is it I've always felt that, or is it no, this is crazy, but the audience said to do it, so we have to?
Right. Yeah. So and it's and it's our money, so you have to, kind of thing. And you get very, it's one of the. This is a little bit of a sidebar, but I think the hardest job we all have is figuring out, how to be the passionate visionary creator that they're saying they want you to be, but then they're saying, no, you have to build a law firm office, and you have to this is our money, we need to be all things to all people. It's a hard line to walk, and so I sort of figured out, okay, I've tried to figure out, all right, well, how do I make them happy, and okay, let's have a couple storylines for him and all that, and it just sort of ended up being, it's always better when you're doing one thing well rather than three things kind of well. Right. And that's sort of what the show ended up being. So. Right.
And Julie, have you, from when you started to where you are, have you sort of been forced to be influenced by the results of these tests, and have you reached a place where it is easier for you to shrug off things that you disagree with or that seem problematic to you? You don't have to build a law office.
No law office. No, the first problem is like I literally don't understand any of it. I sit, he was saying how you sit in the room and you're like watching the dials and it's like a cardiogram on the screen and I'm like, is that good? Is that good? I don't know. I was telling Chad that like I heard this like urban legend that ER tested in the 90s, right? And like you test in the 90s and clearly everything you're amazing. So I kept waiting for my shows for the dials to go up to the 90s and I'm like, they're not going to the 90s. Like, I don't know, like, what's wrong with my shows, And then somebody told me, like, no, that it doesn't really ever get above, like 70. A 71 is pretty freaking awesome, know? And so just even trying to understand the metrics of how it works is impossible. The one thing that makes the tiniest bit of sense to me, because the networks are incredibly, at least at the CW specifically, they are very tight-lipped about their testing results. Like they don't come in at you and be like, well, so-and-so tested great and this part tested really badly. Like they just kind of do it, make their decisions, whether they take it into account or not, but they don't talk to you about it. So the studio said to me, like, we know this is frustrating. We know this part sucks. We all kind of agree with that, but they are going to do this. And so what does it hurt for us to, I'm almost like advocating it, but not really. I just want you to know that.
Sure.
Like when it sounds like I'm advocating it, I'm not really advocating it. Okay. But they said, what does it hurt for us to get a jump on what they are going to learn regardless? Because when all is said and done, I think the thing that, when you're talking about the writer visionary thing versus, an employee of problem, is a pilot, sad but true, is a sales tool. It is a piece of like, it is the cover of the design of the cover of the book, like you said. Yeah. And the studio wants to sell that pilot. They want the network to pick it up over any other pilot they've done. And so they want to position it in a place where whatever the network sees is going to be like the best foot forward as a sales tool to the network. Which, is basically them rolling the business dice. They're just saying, like, we want to present this to make them happy. So you hear that and you're like, okay. So when you test the Vampire Diaries, and the Vampire Diaries starts with a great rock song, because Don Ostroff at the time at the CW was very clear, like, you put pop songs in our shows. Like, I have one rule, and my one rule is you put freaking pop songs in our shows, and you better have a lot of freaking pop songs, because people like pop songs. I'm like, okay, so you have a great rock song, pop song, whatever, of two strangers driving down a road, bantering, and then coming across a dead guy in the road, and like a horror sequence, and the test audience is like, yeah, whatever, those people are fine, like, song's good, whatever, and like you get 4 minutes into your pilot, and everyone's still sort of like, all right, I guess, it's cool, and the dials are sort of like this, and everyone's looking nervously, like, what do we do? And then an executive says, you need something right at the beginning that tells people exactly what this show is. And we're like, that sounds like voiceover. We hate voiceover. Please don't make us do voiceover. Voiceover is bad writing. Voiceover is the devil. Voiceover, everything we've ever taught is that voiceover is terrible. They're like, you need to add voiceover. And so, and I am not kidding, we took a shot of fog rolling through the woods that we stole from a scene where a girl got murdered. We just found like fog only. And, 'cause you don't go reshoot a pilot. You're done. You got no chance. We took fog, and we took Paul Wesley, and he says something like, for 100 years I've lived in the shadows, hiding, living alone, until now I am a vampire. And this is my story. Boom, cut to rock music, and then all of a sudden the dials are like, wee, and you're like, whoa, oh my God, it's amazing. So yeah, that's what happens. You're like, okay, well, but then you're stuck with it. So now to this day, I'm like, people come at me and they're like, I thought it was Stefan's story. And I'm like, oh shit, that's right. We started the show like that. Like,
that's really funny.
So, but does that feel like a compromise, or like, are you ultimately, you see that there's something there and you find a way that you're comfortable with addressing it, or is it haunt you that there's like fog voiceover at the beginning of your series forever?
It haunts you because you fight it so hard for purposes of your own integrity and feeling like that's hack writing or that's a hacky move, and you just hate yourself for it. But it worked. So then you're like, well, maybe I'm the dumbass that didn't think, like, that doesn't know what works.
In the script, you just shorthand it as FVO now, just fog voiceover. Like,
It's a standard tool. Anytime there's
yeah.
confusion, let's have somebody explain that over fog.
I have this. I'll show you the graph of the initial Playboy Club testing.
Wow, I think you're like totally illegal
I know.
and 20
Nobody
of them
take a
gonna
picture of
tackle
this.
you, but I'm
Serious.
excited about
Don't
it.
take a picture of this. But if you can see this, the red line is women and the blue line is men. So it's like women like and men hate the same, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so then the network reaction is, we need to get men to like the show, so we need to make Eddie Cibrian's character bigger so everybody likes it. And then,
So it's just acknowledging that it's a woman's show.
it's the Playboy Club.
But I don't even understand how that's the react. The show is called The Playboy Club. Women seem to like it. We need to get men to like it. So what we should have is more Eddie Cibrian and like a law office. I think you might have been doing it
Seems
wrong.
like there's a simpler answer.
And Ben, I've read sort of about your experiences just in general, how much happier you are with the FX process, how they feel sort of very hands-off. How's the testing sort of environment in that world?
I think FX is more like HBO. Had you had another slide, I would have pitched you put FX up there, because they really are. Every conversation I've had with them has been basically a gut-based conversation. To me, and I'm sure these guys share this, when you get notes from somebody that doesn't feel like it's actually their opinion, that's really maddening. And when you are talking to a human being and they're saying, I just kind of feel like this could be better, or this just didn't work for me, then we can have a conversation. Then it's a creative discussion, and as you know, nothing's written in stone. You can always improve upon stuff, but it's very hard to hit a mark that you don't know where the mark is or where it's coming from. And if it doesn't sound like, there's a difference between sort of making a prescription and making a diagnosis. And sometimes the diagnosis may be right, but the prescription is wildly wrong. My experience at FX is that they did test it. They didn't share any of the testing with us. They were very candid about the fact that testing's not determinative to them for picking up a pilot or for picking up a series. It's just something they do to have more information, which seems fine. But literally every creative conversation that we had on our show was just sort of between human beings talking about, it just feels like there could be more of this or less of that. And there was a remarkably little amount of any notes that came to us. FX really, you talked about Larry and Jerry, and my partner Larry Charles worked on many years of Seinfeld and worked on Curb. FX is one of those places that they put their chips on the people and they say, go, do your thing. And that's been my experience. It's been great. It's a dream. I never want to go back.
Sounds terrible. I don't know how to survive it.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us about sort of the executive side of it? And we have to do one of these tests a season. You're going in there over and over with everything that you've sort of shepherded.
Yeah, we could have something like 10 to 12 pilots a season, and you have to go testing on every single one. And it is frustrating. And Julie, we're talking about, on the studio side, even if you don't want to test, and I kind of think it's a silly process, the network is going to do it. So really the studio level, we're not the ones that are going to say, let's completely reconceive it before we deliver it, because the network's expecting a certain show. But for me, I think it can be helpful if there's maybe a pacing issue or a clarity issue. I mean, not to add like fog and VO, but if there's, and by the way, there could be something that you as a producer say, that scene was bothering me too. I felt like we could pace it up a little bit. And there's little tweaks that you can do, but it is very frustrating. And it's frustrating on our end, and it's hard because some writers are more sensitive to it than others, and you're sitting there with them and someone's saying, is this a comedy? Because I didn't laugh once. It's like the worst thing I've ever seen. And, if they give bad feedback, then you say like, oh, those people are idiots. Or if it's brilliant, they're like, this is a really sophisticated crowd. Like, they get it. They get us. So it is very difficult, but for me, I think it's the small tweaks and a lot of the times it is things that you, in your gut, go, okay, I do see, but, they throw things out like, we hate the lead. The lead is, I recast it. Well, there's nothing you can do. You've shot the pilot, and but again, you do it because you know the network is going to do it, and you don't want any surprises coming your way. You can maybe manage the situation prior, or talk about, well, I see this in series, or if you really do see it in series. So we're in a precarious position of, I think our job as the studio, and sometimes you're more successful at it than not, but is to really protect the writer as much as possible, but still you want to sell a show and it's delivering to the network. So it's trying to be a buffer as much as possible and protecting the writers.
And are you ever gobsmacked by a reaction? Is it one you thought was great is received horribly, or vice versa? Or is it generally kind of no, we knew that wasn't going to work?
Never. I mean, that's 5% of the time. I mean, you have this random group of people who probably aren't the demographic that you're going for. I mean, you do the Playboy Club, you could have, you have 8 men in the room, or, it's a little lopsided. Yeah, I mean, we had this actor that it was the hottest actor in town. Everybody wanted this person for their pilot. We know he's a big star. We tested, and people just didn't get it. They absolutely hated him. They wanted him to have nothing part of it. And they just don't understand it. Or you get silly things and it is a very interesting study in men versus women and what they respond to, because I swear to God, this is true. We had this one pilot where, I said, what did you like about, the first question is usually, what did you like about it? And you hope they say it was really funny if it's a comedy, or God, the story's interesting. And it was, we liked her shirt because she had an extremely tight shirt on with a bra that was kind of see-through, and for the men, that was that's what they liked most about. And then you're where do you go from there? How do you have a constructive conversation?
You give the wardrobe department a raise.
Right, exactly.
It is disappointing as a male to watch a show and watch the blue line, what we're actively in front of other people telling them gets us to turn the dial.
That's what I'm struck by, how honest that guy was. It was the see-through.
But all the other guys were yeah, I agree.
Right.
Totally.
Well, you had that little slide that said that women are hard on women, and I, just anecdotally speaking, I experienced that where we had this female character who was very successful in the cut, and we're wow, she really pops. She's really great. We go to the testing, we start watching the female version of the focus group, and we weren't watching the men. So they come in at the end and they tell you what the men think, but we were watching the women. And we get to talking about that character, and the women were we don't like her. We were what? And the guy said, why? And she's not hot enough to get that guy that seems to like her. And she left her kid alone. She's a terrible mother. So exactly what you said. These women were such, excuse my language, bitches about this girl. And she was a terrible mother, and she's not hot enough. She's not hot enough. I was we are women, people. This is horrible. Meanwhile, so I'm well, that's terrible. That A, for the actress, B, for humanity. And then, and then the woman who had been running the men's session comes in, and we said, well, how did they feel about so-and-so? And she said, oh my God, they loved her so much. She's so approachable. She's like the girl next door. She's the one that they all think that they would fall in love with them. She's gettable. They loved her. She was their favorite character, hands down. And I thought, you bitches, total horrible mean girls. But it's exactly what you said. And so the bigger voice could actually taint, if we weren't hearing the men raving, we would have heard the women complaining a lot louder, and it was really fascinating.
Right. Yeah, we found that the women are the mothers are that's so hard for them to test well, because a real character is not a perfect mother, and God forbid you yell at that you're yelling at the kids, or put them in front of the television. They're they're horrible. I'm come to my then I'm the worst mother ever, because that's what you do as a mother, and it's real, and it's almost like the female characters aren't allowed to be real. Flawed, exactly.
Go ahead.
No, in small defensive testing, and I too. well, no. I
feel like I've gone overboard in terms of bashing it. I'm more saying it it has been demonstrated it has no predictive value.
Right.
We can all decide how useful it is or isn't. The feedback in terms of like shaping what we've created, how we feel about VO fog or not. But with or without that, that doesn't tell me whether or not the Vampire Diaries is going to be a successful show. Like if you rocket off the scale because you add that, still doesn't tell me if it's going to work or not work.
Oh yeah, and I should say I worked for a showrunner who was incredibly driven by the test results, and I hated it so much that I wound up writing a monologue that I performed in Jill Soloway's show, actually, which was I was the guy who had invented focus group testing for the Nazis in like the 30s, and there were these rudimentary dials, and the people in Germany would turn the dials to the stuff they liked, and it was like the Kill the Jews stuff was actually the best testing stuff. But in small defense of testing, I had one of the most educational 2 hours of my life a couple of years ago when I did a pilot, and we tested it, and we got to sit behind the one-way glass. And first of all, my first realization was when the dials were okay, I realized I wasn't prepared for had they not been okay, because if people were hating it, I probably would have just taken myself out back and just committed suicide. It was nauseating, but we learned an unbelievably important thing on that show, which didn't go to series and never got on the air for this reason. We had the main relationship was between a guy and his adult friend, but this guy was married with a kid, and his wife was played by an Asian actress, and we had to cast the kid, and we were having trouble finding a kid between 8 and 10 who was half Asian. It was just it was just difficult to find a kid who was good. And we had a kid that we really liked and was really small. He wasn't that good of an actor, but he was cute, and he really looked like he could have been the child of these two actors. The very powerful head of the studio said, no, we're casting this guy, this kid, 11-year-old kid, chubby is funny. Like it was literally like that was what we were told, and we had to cast this kid. And then we spent the next 2 months talking ourselves into that it's okay, that it can work with this kid. This kid was not half Asian. This kid was like a white kid. And we spent all this time like, yeah, I think it's okay, and he's kind of funny. And then the test audience was like, who's that kid? Why are they hanging out with this kid who's their son? It's just like, and the actors were too young to have a kid that old. And, it was just, and it was like, and you're in there and you're in the room and you're like, oh yeah, of course. That's 100% what I would see if I were watching that show on television. I'd be like, that's not their child. But it's this, and what we should have done is unfortunately we should have recast the boy, but you can't do that at that point. And it was just dead as a doornail for good reason,
right.
Frankly. But, had that process then been followed up with, hey, you have a chance to address this problem, it actually would have helped.
But that problem was one that you yourself, from the beginning, like you always felt icky and weird about it.
Completely.
Like the testing ultimately confirmed
and then
your
you talk
initial...
yourself out of your own gut.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because like you have to, again, it's their money, and they get to decide who you can and can't cast.
Right.
So you talk yourself out of your own gut, and then when you actually see people sort of just reacting honestly, it's really informative.
Right. I mean, not to sort of go after it again, but when you talk to people at HBO to Fox, whether they test or don't test, they will all tell you you don't discover anything. You confirm what you already knew. But the stuff that, like, you said it was funny on the page, we thought it was funny in the first cut, the test audience thinks it's funny. When we see the Twitter reaction, they thought it was funny. Like, it's consistent all the way through. So it's just sort of this layer where we go through this exercise that it tends not to turn over new rocks so much as get you to look closer at the things that you already anticipated or had a feeling about.
Yeah, and if it goes in the other direction and it's something you didn't think was a problem, it sometimes can just be because of one person in the focus group who for some reason has that opinion, and then everyone else gets whipped up and they're like, yeah, or even just two people and then get whipped up, and then it gets into the notes that get passed on to the network, and then this suddenly is a problem because this one person thought this thing.
The 12 Angry Men.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
So, like, how has the process changed since Playboy Club for, like, when you did Wayward Pines? It was a very different kind of show, like the whole approach to it.
Totally different. In this case, it was much more helpful, I would say. don't know, helpful is the word, but definitely not destructive.
No law offices?
Well, thanks. I mean, but in some ways, well, okay. So yeah, really interesting, right? We had, it was a 10 episode straight to series order. So we were going to be making all the 10 episodes no matter what. So after we made the pilot, we tested the pilot. And there were definite things that I thought needed to be improved in the pilot. And those things were somewhat confirmed by the testing. So that was helpful to me because it was, there was the director, M. Night Shyamalan, there was the network, and there were some different opinions about things. And we were able to look at some of the testing and go, oh, okay, like now, see, like we can, and we did some reshoots and everything, and that worked in a way. And then in some ways, it's like a bunch of stuff you don't need, you don't need to know or is destructive. And thankfully, we had the support of the network and all of that since we were making 10 episodes. Then we did some reshoots for the pilot. It tested better. Then we also tested the second episode. That tested better than the pilot, and then it sort of never was a destructive problem. It was a little bit helpful, I guess. Yeah.
See, I sort of feel like the only thing that really should matter to networks when they're picking this stuff up is intent to view. It's like, right. Because to me, that's a useful tool. You show them an episode, you say, hey, did you like this enough to watch it, to try to watch it again? To, oh my God, I have to watch this again, or, oh, I'm never watching this shit again, die,
Right.
And like, because ultimately, as you said, the pilot is if you look at it in movie terms, the pilot is your teaser of the movie. The pilot is the 2-minute teaser that you see in the theaters before other movies. The movie itself is the entire run of the series. So, it takes 35 minutes in a movie before you click into concept and character. Well, not anymore, but still in general. And so if your pilot is just your trailer, you need a couple episodes to let the concept and character really live and breathe. And so you just got to get them in so that they stick around. So
right.
To me, intent to view would be a great metric. Yeah. And they have it. You can speak to that.
No, I was just saying, it is shocking because you'll test and they'll be, just brutal. And then at the end, how many people how do you intend to view? And everybody will, still want to watch it, even though, they're like, oh, well, I'm curious to see what happens. I'd stick with it after they've just, and you're right. It is. It's the intent to view, is what eyeballs are actually going to be on it.
Or they'll rave about it, and then you'll say, like, how are you going to watch it? They're like, I don't know, maybe.
Not for me. Not for me. Somebody will like it, not me.
And those are definitely the places where testing has been demonstrated to be predictive, is when you test the marketing. Like, so, even with movies, you can change the 2-hour movie to some extent. You might edit it, you might reshoot things. The trailer, you can make an infinite number of ways. And all the trailer has to do is convince you to come spend your $9 the first, I don't know, $9, maybe a pipe dream. I'm not sure. Maybe you're seeing it in Iowa. But the
35-minute first act.
Exactly. But yeah, you could make, you've seen the things where they turn The Shining into a comedy as a trailer. So testing those things literally just to get that, are you coming? Does this make you want to see it? And a lot of networks have moved to testing. They either have a department that tests their marketing, or they're very reliant on market testing.
I think that's the best use of testing for me that I've seen, especially for Wayward Pines, because the testing shows that the show is confusing. No one knows what's going on. This is so weird. I don't get it, but like in a good way. And so the marketing department embraced that, and the whole ad campaign is like, what the fuck is going on here? And we're saying yes to that. So that helped. And Joe Early, who's the CEO and does all the marketing for Fox and launched Empire in such a brilliant way, and Wayward Pines, I think they did an amazing marketing job. Is a lot. I know they used all the testing for that. So
yeah, we had an incident on one of my shows where one of the lead actresses was not featured on the key art for the marketing campaign. And I was like, oh God, because this is not going to go well, And I said to the network, I'm like, are you guys sure you want to go down this road? She's not on the poster. Like, that is a PR nightmare for me, for you, for the whole company. And they said, we tested 37 versions of this poster with everybody, with nobody, with no faces, with all faces, with some faces. This is the version that tested the highest. This is the poster we're going with. And I said, well, all right, I'm not going to fight her fight for her. And the poster was extremely, extremely effective. But I had never thought of that they would test a billion versions of your poster.
How do you break that to the actor? Like, people are more interested in seeing it if they don't know you're in it. As long as we hide that from them, they're there.
I leave it to the publicist and I hide. I hide.
You don't tell them. You wait and see if they notice, which they will. And then
Yeah, they
Wait
probably
and see if
won't
they
notice.
complain. You wait and see if you walk down the crying. Yeah.
Yeah, they put the fog over her face.
That's the voice, that mystery character. With a show like Community, I don't know how well you remember sort of the testing process, but for something that that show is maybe still finding itself. I mean, it morphs and changes. How do people react to what it initially is, and how does someone like Dan react to what people tell him they think about what he's done?
I can't remember if Dan didn't come. I think he actually did not come because I think he kind of knew better, because I think Dan would have gone to a very dark place, with any negative comment, because he's just so smart and he really does think so much about the show and have reasons for everything, every storyline, every character. It's insane to hear him talk about the show. I actually don't think he went. I think he just couldn't bring himself to. I think he wasn't going to go and end up maybe last minute, but I think we knew that show was very special. Like I literally remember when we heard the pitch, we knew it was something special. And when this first script came in, I was like a page in, and I emailed my boss. I'm like, this is something. This is it. Like, this is very different. So I think we went in with the and the network loved it. It was always a project that was very championed. So especially for that show, for me, it was a very specific voice that I knew would have a very specific audience. Even just the way that the dialogue was rapid fire. I actually don't remember. I think it tested good. But yeah, I don't think Dan went. I think
that was a really good pilot. I remember that.
Great pilot.
It was a really
I was very proud of that one.
It was perfectly cast. It sold its concept. It was funny. And so that's one of the good stories.
Yeah.
Where you just actually get it.
It's also a great example of a show that morphed and really evolved, and which is to your point of Seinfeld and all these other shows where you really don't know what the series is going to be at pilot, because I've rewatched that pilot a bunch of times, and it's great, and it's so different from season 2, and it's different from late season 1, and so it's all to your point of, if you trust the creator, if we do our job right, we're self-correcting organisms. You know what I mean? Like, we will find the weaknesses, and we'll diagnose them, and hopefully we'll fix them, and that's where I think. You talk about trailers, that's all, or posters, that's all intent to view. There's nothing, that's the only metric of that.
Right.
Whereas a pilot, as you say, it's your job, Dan, or in our cases, is to find what works and continue to adapt.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I don't know if you guys do this, but when I write a script or have a first cut of a pilot or something, I sort of test it myself with 3 friends or other writers or people that I trust, who I know are going to be honest with me. I have this circle of, and if all 3 of them say it's too long, it's probably too long. I'll listen to that kind of thing, but I trust that more than, in terms of the quality and what I want to do and what my vision is, I would listen to that more than the, whoever they found in Vegas to take the $75, which is fine, and those are probably more the people who are going to be watching the show, obviously in the big picture. But you're right. We'll self-correct. If something isn't working, we don't want that to happen. We don't want it to be not working. We want it to work.
But also, the bottom line is you talk from writing from a place of passion and your gut and what you want to do, and that's what you should do. The problem is, people sometimes just don't like your show, and that's the thing. It's you I remember Lone Star, for example, was the absolute most popular pilot. Everybody talked about it. It was the favorite script. It was everyone was raving. I remember seeing it being this is freaking great, and then 4 people watched it, and then it was over, and you're
I knew all of those people, all in my family.
But that's the point. Is sometimes there's just a rejection of.
Yep.
Of concept or whatever, no matter how good the visionary is behind it, And
have you guys ever been exposed to the in-season testing, where they are continuing to test your episodes as you go? And how does that feedback reach you, and what do you do with it?
Since I work at FX, so no.
Yes.
No, I don't. If they test it in season, I literally, I don't even know if they do.
Okay.
I think they're fairly data driven, but ultimately they're also taste driven. I think it's a little bit of a different metric than the 4 networks, where there's a certain amount of, they want a certain amount of prestige associated with their shows and a certain amount of buzzworthiness. But if there's testing in season, I don't know about it.
Got it.
Blissfully.
I was actually surprised to learn that there was testing in season, and it's actually done, I think, mostly by the studio. Again, the network might be doing it. They don't talk about it. Actually, as we're talking about this, I remembered that the first rule of testing is you're not supposed to talk about testing. So I am not here.
Yeah.
And none of these quotes can be attributable to me. It's an imposter talking
Chad
about...
definitely did not show you that graphic. Like I asked 20th many times.
Nobody
You
took
know,
that
it'd be
picture.
great. Like just for my own shows. Like, do you mind? I have no way. So.
But what is fun about it is like it just, the in-season testing kind of just affirms what you already know, and and the best version of in-season testing, they'll just send you little charts. They'll be like, by the way, we went out to the field, just it's the end of the year, we want to see how people still think things are working, and you look at it and they're like, you're like, oh good, they like the relationships we like, they don't like the relationships we don't like, they don't like that character right now, but we know we kind of did not service that character well this year. We kind of flamed out, so now we got to do better. It's a lot of we already know we have to do better kind of affirmations. Rarely are there any surprises like, oh, there's complete rejection of this storyline. You get that, you learn that these days from Twitter and social media and all that. Like just if there's an abject rejection of something, you tend to get the hint.
See, with Awake, they began to test episodes in season, and the tests were coming back. Look, this is like a weird show. Nobody really understands what's going on except for the procedural part of it. Like, can you really beef up? Can it mostly be about solving 2 crimes? So, there's this section where we're sort of really pushed to make it just about solving.
Don't understand it in a bad way, or like
They're like, what? I don't understand. This is weird. He sleeps and he's in another world. What's going? I know he solves crimes. That part I understand.
But also, so many notes, just having nothing to do with testing, are make this clearer. And my partner Matt Nix, when he was doing his show Burn Notice, he used to turn in cuts, and he would say the promo for this is going to be tonight on the clearest episode of Burn Notice yet. Like, you'll understand everything.
Yes. Well, to your fog thing, that is the note you get on everything. In the first 5 minutes, they didn't fully understand what was going on. It's like, well, isn't it great that we have 55 more where they can figure it out? Like, do they need a dossier before they start to watch? Like, that's just how life is. You don't understand. I guess I wasn't smart enough to think of that could have saved Lone Star beginning with foggy voiceover.
We've never done mid-season testing on the studio side. I've never heard that. I do with children's programming, which is very interesting. They do a lot of testing because you're wanting to get in the mind of kids and what they want. And I've experienced this kind of recently, and we're able to make some tweaks that I feel like actually helped the show. But one interesting thing about kids and testing that you find out is you would think that kids would love the wish fulfillment world of being alone and having freedom, but kids get very nervous if there's not adults around. Like, they don't want them to be the focus of the show, but they want to know that they're there. So that's why there's always the teacher or the parents are in the background, but the kids need to know that there is an adult that's watching out. It's almost like a safety thing, which I found, because I would think it would be opposite, that they would want this dream life, but no, they're
Kids
very
are like, the
clear
parents
about
in the
that.
show are
They're
terrible
terrified.
parents.
Yeah.
I hate them.
They like them to be in the other room, but we know they're there. But I found that extremely interesting. That's why you never just see a show of just children. There's always somebody. There's always teachers or parents.
I think the thing that's a bummer going off your Awake thing is that, you probably pitched a show that was 30% procedural, 70% character and mythology, right? And I mean, I'm just making that up for you. You don't have to tell me.
That's the exact. That's exactly right.
And then, as a result of all kinds of internal talks, ratings, testing or whatever, they then say to you, well, we need a show that's 80, 90% procedural and 10, as though you are a wind-up story guy that you're like, oh, I'm great at procedural. If I was great at procedural, I probably would have pitched you a show that was 80% procedural.
Right.
If somebody said to me, thank you so much for this teen drama, but can you add an entire cop element to it?
Yep.
As though I'm a freaking genius that knows everything about everything, I would fail. And that's I think the biggest problem is in terms of putting your faith in the creators. Your creators are only capable of so much. If you want a different show, like, and I think creators should be just as willing to say, you want a different show?
Right.
Like, part ways gently, kindly. Be like, you know what, we just realized that we can't support the show that we thought we could be okay with you making. So if you actually aren't like cool with what we want to do, like, we get it and it's cool, and then you just walk away and you're like, well, that was a fun exercise, and giving up my child, sending him to boarding school and letting somebody completely recondition them. But
that's exactly what happened with Playboy Club. Like, what did I know about writing 60s mob legal case things? I mean, I could figure it out, I guess, but that's not what I wanted to write about. And what was so odd is that script, my pilot script, was the first script that was picked up to pilot, and then the first pilot that was picked up to series before, and it was completely the show that I wrote, and completely, Alan Taylor directed an amazing pilot. Then they tested it. Then before it aired, we had to change all this stuff. And so no one ever saw that pilot.
Wow.
So it never aired as the show that I created. It aired as this, thing because of the testing.
Right.
So yeah, which sucks.
I think it's, to a certain extent, it's our job to say, if that's what you want, I can't do that. If that's true,
right.
And I think there's honor in that. I mean, you don't want to sort of be an obstructionist, but at the same time, you don't want to promise something that you can't deliver.
Yeah.
And it sounds like we've all kind of done that on some level.
But it's hard because you feel like, I don't want to be obstinate. I don't want to be the difficult one.
Or
I don't want to be the diva.
Do the best job of this that I can, but just know that.
And that's, ideally, and what I think, as the studio, I feel like that's our responsibility to really help. You've sold a certain show, and a lot of the times, the networks start off the pilot season wanting the cop procedural, and then by the end they have 1,000 of those, and then they're trying to change some of the ones they bought to be something it wasn't. But I feel like, that's, sometimes we're more successful at it than others, but, you really try and protect the writer and their vision and be their advocate. That's the whole job of the studio, is to be the writer's advocate, I feel.
Cool. Can I open it up to you guys? Does anybody in the audience have questions? Yeah.
I have a question about the actual test groups that you have. I come from the ad side, and we're always told, oh, this test is so fantastic. And on the chart that you didn't show us, it showed men and women. Do y'all have any influence over your actual test demographics? Like, do you get to say, well, we want them to be certain age ranges, or we want men and women? Or are you at least told the age range?
Yeah, I also have the age graph in here. Yeah, there's a, I can pull it up.
Just real quick, in case you all couldn't hear her, the question was, do we have any influence over how the group, what the demographics of the group, the test group are?
I think the studio controls at least the basic, or the network controls the basic desired breakdown. Like, they don't want, CW doesn't want, women from 50 to 72, in their test group, or men at all, but they'll take men. They'll take men. But.
Yeah, we don't have influence on it. It's usually men and women, and then this one is, let's see, age 18 to 34 and 35 to 49. So blue is younger, red is older.
I always thought, and maybe I'm naive, but I thought it was just like a range of men and women of different ages. It just to literally pick a random sample. And this is all in Los Angeles and the Valley. It's all people that kind of live in that area. They get paid a certain amount of money to come in and tell the reaction, whether it's a TV show or a soda. And then sometimes networks will do a broader one. They'll go to Vegas because you get so many different people there. Which is a little bit more diverse, but I think for the most part, it's just a random,
So
mix of people.
Traditionally, it's always been sort of a random sampling of the general audience. You want to see how many people it plays with, but it's actually turning upside down with the fracturing of television. They're going out of their way to assemble audiences. If AMC is testing something, they want people who watch these FX shows, these HBO shows. They want to know that they're talking to their audience, and if they decide that they're going to pick something up, they do it the other way. They start looking at, because with AMC in particular, there's very little overlap between their audiences. The people that watch Mad Men are not necessarily watching Walking Dead. So they got to create an audience for every show when they pick it up. So they will use focus groups to tell them who will watch this. Who should we be pursuing with our ads, and how do we talk to them? And when we were talking about the marketing, it can go both ways. So that with the The Killing, they determined that they had, it was largely a female audience, and in the Venn diagram of it, sort of the places where the two different, it was like people who loved crime shows and people who loved family shows. And the thing you could talk to those two audiences about that like both of them responded to was puzzles. They both like things that were about solving puzzles. So you can see how you get from that to Who Killed Rosie Larson, which is like an incredible marketing plan. It worked really, really well to get people in the door. It just really pissed them off when you didn't answer that question.
But do you do like ad buying for television? Okay, here's my question. So do they say like this was the highest network testing thing of all times and you guys are like, great, we have to have it? And did this just shatter your reality right here?
Well, I was going to say, I cannot pick the number of phone calls we got. I just got an email like this weekend from the media buyer, because I'm on the account executive side for like the Mad Men world.
Yeah.
I got an email, this tested absolutely fantastic, it's going to be great, you know, Hispanics 35 to 45, it's going to be wonderful. And I'm like, that means nothing.
Yeah.
All the time.
Well, you can pull something positive, and sometimes, like as a studio, you would do that, where the network could go like, well, how was it testing? We really don't want to give them our information, because what if theirs is something different? So, you know, if they're like, the women 65 to 66, killed it. So you could always pull something, right? Or this scene was amazing, and the rest could have been shit. But you can always, they're pulling out like the little tiny area. Yeah. But there are those shows that do, like ER, that tested, but that's not the norm. When you said 90, I said, oh my God, I don't think I've ever seen anything peak to a 90.
Do you guys have any more follow-up questions for her?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Do you want to come up here?
Is anybody else? You in the back?
This isn't about testing, but I feel like it's good for you guys. Do you ever get disappointed by kind of the taste Americans seem to have in TV?
Yes.
Yeah.
In general, the really good stuff does end up finding an audience, or are there a lot of stuff that we never even get to see because we're not? Or do you think that we're just not rated? Like, I don't even know how people get ratings anymore, but I feel like none of the shows that my friends like stay on.
It's sort of like the this is why we can't have nice things, America. Like, you know, it's, and I'm
You
trying
guys
to think
can't be
of
trusted.
A good recent example, but like, and this is no offense to a show like 2.5 Men, for example. I mean, like, 2.5 Men it has been a massive hit for a massively long amount of time. And for me, I just look at it and I'm like, I hate you. I hate everything about you. And then you know, I have a show like, over the last decade and a half, pretty much every single camera comedy that's been made. I mean, we talked about Community. Community was canceled 4 times. You know, Parks and Rec was on the bubble every year. Arrested Development, like, died on the vine. And then it was just a cult following that accumulated over the years that, like, brought it back to Netflix, and a popularity amongst, like, a really niche, wealthy, yeah, like your friends, right? So for me, and you guys can speak to that, like, it kills me because I'm like, is there room for like that smart, cool show, or is it just going to get killed in favor of the dumb one?
You just named 2 shows that got resurrected so that I could then go work on them. Arrested and Community, but I think actually the thing that I'm finding, having finally after about 18 years of doing this actually accomplished this, is that I actually made a show that I would watch this year, which is. I know really well is actually a miracle. It's very, very hard. And I think then your job is to kind of let go the result in some ways, because you can't gauge whether something is going to connect out there. I don't think that's possible. You do what you would watch ultimately.
Yeah.
And
Can I ask, like, is that, I mean, maybe you can't answer, or I don't know, but is that ultimately your guiding principle with the shows that you've worked on? Like, are you in the end saying, this is a show, this is what I am most excited about, I'm going to create the show I most want to watch? Or are you servicing an audience? Like, do you know this is what they want to watch and you do it very well?
I think a show I would want to watch.
It's like chicken or the egg.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Hopefully one that does both.
Yeah, hopefully both. Yeah, obviously. Yeah, hopefully both. I definitely wanted to watch Wayward Pines. I wanted to write all those episodes and watch that show, and I had so much fun doing it. And I think I thought less about what the audience would like or not like than I had ever thought about before. which I think sort of freed me up to just do it. And it was nice because we've made all 10 episodes before it ever started airing. So there's no way to change anything or whatever. Like, it is what it is. So,
Right.
yeah.
I can say, sitting down with a lot of writers this year for this coming development season, and I think, I'm sure, Ben, you've experienced, probably from Sony, you experienced this when I was there. But sometimes if you have a deal at a studio, I mean, their goals to make money. And so if they see you as like a big broadcast guy or girl, they will probably try and push you that way, even though that's not what you want to do. But I've sat down with a lot of writers this year that I've loved, I work with, and they just say, and in a lot of people think of them as, oh, well, you can do the next big multicam, that's what we want you to do. And they go, I'm not watching any of the broadcast shows. Like, everything that I watch is cable. They're watching Veep, they're watching Broad City, they're watching all these great shows. And they said, that's what I want to make. And everyone wants me for the big broadcast multi, but that's not what I want to do right now. And so I think especially right now, there's so much great stuff on. And when we sit with writers, I mean, there's not a lot of broadcast, and I love broadcast television. I will always love it and will continue to develop it. But a lot of people are just really wanting to make the shows they watch, and they don't watch.
The thing I don't understand is, like, so I don't watch most broadcasts anymore either. Like, I watch my own shows, I watch Scandal, right? And then everything else that I watch is on cable. But the cable shows get more ratings than the broadcast shows. Like, Walking Dead is like the biggest show on the planet on the drama side, gets more ratings, I think, more numbers at this point than like even the procedurals. And so what the hell is broadcast doing wrong that, like, those shows that everyone's calling cable shows can't get made for broadcast and get the audience that cable is getting? It's a weird thing I can't figure out.
Well, I think that Game of Thrones and some dramas are very much appointment television, where you watch them that day. And a lot of the comedies, because they're younger audiences, they're not watching it that day, and then they're not watching it within 3 days, which really, you can kind of gather that data. I mean, I'm sure all of you'll watch it, you'll binge watch something a week later, and you'll watch everything that you love, and then you're never accounted for. So shows that are probably massive successes, like Schumer and all of those, like, their ratings are horrible. Even Community, the ratings were never, that for all intents and purposes, that show should never have gone as long as it did, and into syndication. It was a miracle, but everyone thought it was a big hit because of all the critical acclaim and the rabid fans. But the way that people, I mean, it's got to change. The ratings is just such a ridiculous, it's a whole other, what you did last year. It's kind of ridiculous because the core audience is not watching it live or in a couple days anymore.
I was just talking about your question about, your question about doing things that you love versus things that you think you can do because people want to watch it. I was just talking about this with my partner the other day because now Wayward Pines is over, and it's like, people are sending me things like, do you want to adapt this graphic novel? Do you want to adapt this magazine thing? Do you want to adapt this book? Do you want to, or we have an idea for a show, and it's very hard because you go like, well, I could totally do that. Like, you're like, okay, I could find a way to do this. I can make this a show. Like, this could be a thing. And you really have to listen. I mean, I'm in the middle of this right now. Like, listen, like, to yourself. Like, what do I know? I could do it. I could take that thing and do it because I've been doing this a long time. You could structure that into a story and make it a TV series. But should you be lucky enough to actually have it become a series and you're shooting it and you're making it, it's so much a part of your life. It is your entire life when you're the showrunner, that you should hopefully like it and want to be doing it for yourself at some level, because it's so life consuming that if you're doing something you don't really want to be doing in the first place and you're doing it just for the audience, that would be really hard,
Yeah, it's hell when you love it.
Yeah.
Right.
It's hard when you love it. Yeah.
Over here.
Hi. So earlier in your presentation, you were talking about how Seinfeld, the first 3-4 episodes were pretty bad.
Yes.
Not else to say that. But the network gave it a chance to get better because he trusted that Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David would find their niche or whatever. So how come a lot of other shows still to this day are getting canceled after 3 episodes? Because I was thinking of a show, Selfie, that was on this year. I mean, it's not the greatest title, and it wasn't even a great pilot, but I watched it and it kept getting better and better as the show went on. But they canceled it after like 6 or 7 episodes. And I think that there are some shows that get canceled pretty quickly, and they deserve to, they're really bad there, and it doesn't seem like they're going to get better. But some, they keep getting better with each episode, and I keep thinking, why aren't people saying, well, look at Seinfeld, that was horrible in the beginning, but then by season 2 and 3, it kept getting better and better. So why are networks giving some of these freshman shows more of a chance?
Well, it's an entirely different world. So, like Seinfeld, when they brought it back and showed the pilot the second time after they'd run the first 4 episodes, it got a 10.7. And they decided that was, like, 10.7 is NFL now. Like, that was kind of a crappy number in 1989. It was like, well, I guess if it got a 10, we'll give it a try. But there were 4 networks at the time, and so the competition was a lot less fierce. I mean, what every person on this panel has said about most of what I watch is on cable, like that option didn't exist in 1989. If you watched television, you watched something on the 4 major broadcast networks. So there was a lot more time to incubate stuff. You could hide it and see if it found an audience. Even like there was another sort of slide in there about Ray Romano and how Everybody Loves Raymond. Like, it was sort of the last one to kind of sneak in this era where, like, I don't know, I believe in it, let's stick it on Friday, like, we'll incubate it. And networks that are doing well, they can take some shots like that. But we live now in a world where, like, it works or it doesn't work on day 1. And if it doesn't, it's not coming back. Like, the numbers for Selfie, like, you know, it's sad but true. It's exactly what you said about Community. Like, Community never blew up. Like, it remained awesome and it became cooler and it found itself. But from a ratings standpoint, if you're just looking at the business of it, you're looking at that saying things don't really change. Like, they don't explode. So they're very, very reticent to sort of give long-term opportunities to things that don't explode out of the gate.
There's just so much competition, and you know, we're seeing more, which you've experienced, is shows being picked up straight to series, which is the best case scenario. I'm not having to go through the pilot process. So you're seeing that a lot of places, people want something, they believe in it, they're just going to commit to it, which I think is great, because as a fan, it's frustrating when pilots come out and new series. I kind of now go, well, is it going to stick around? Then I'll wait, and then I'll watch it all later, because it's very frustrating. But it is a fun time to have the opportunity to just go straight to series, and you know you're making all of those episodes.
I think we got time for one more. Go ahead.
I was just wondering if testing had anything to do with whether a show was picked up for like a second season, because there's all these shows that kind of sit on the bubble for a while, or is that all?
I'd be the wrong person to answer that. I've never been to a second season.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Wayward Pines has been on for 4 weeks, and it's my longest running show. So, yeah.
Congratulations.
Honestly,
Thank
I don't think testing, because you don't test it after, whether they're on the bubbles or waiting to see how their new pilots are. So if their new pilots are amazing and they think they're better than that show, so all those shows are waiting to see, you know, is there a hotter girl coming along that I'm going to leave you for, kind of thing.
Kind of better deal,
Yeah, I'm sitting here with my fingers crossed for a second season. So I think, but there's also much more empirical data, which is called ratings, you know, and so that I would imagine to a certain extent can supplant testing, because it's not. The testing was, it went out there, and did people watch it or not?
Also, the standard by which networks define their own success is year to year growth. So they break it down each night of programming. Is this year's Monday better than last year's Monday? And then they do an overall, is this season better? Most overall numbers are like a little bit up, a little bit down, but like you can make dramatic change on a night, and then like you're lauding the night, you know, Monday is up 28% over last year, and that's what the press runs with, and that's what that becomes the sound bites. So suddenly the network is having a boom year when the aggregate of their success is like 0.02% up, you know.
Right. You can probably speak to this too, well, all of us, but the what I've been told with Wayward Pines by Fox is that, like, we really just care about the live +3 numbers. It's not really so much about the overnight number as much.
Yeah, the CW is at the point now where they're like, I think iZombie was about to come on, and they're like, we love this show so much. I'm like, are you worried about the ratings? Do you think people watch? They're like, we don't care. We don't care about ratings anymore. We know what people are coming to our website to see. We know what the pop culture, the zeitgeist value of it is. We know that like these shows are living a long time in the pop culture environment. And we know this is a good show, so we don't
Does everyone
care.
know what Live Plus 3 means? It just means that you watch it in the 3 days after it airs. Whoever, like on your DVR. Yeah.
Great. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank all of you for coming. Really appreciate it. Enjoy your festival.
Thanks.